A hushed and cleaned up earth awaits a student once of Latin, Greek, the classics, arranged on the bleached steppe a biology lesson. As the mercury drops at nightfall, away from the gleaming city center, below the golden spire pointed to heaven, between the serrated Sierra and the jagged coast ranges, downy white swirls, driving through relentless rain as the day dimmed. Each avenue is a remembered year. Each day they paint the sky. In his city of streets laid out in grids, in how many ways can you spell shop? Well, these are the first lines of some of the poems. I read it out of page 47, index the first lines from the Mantram Beach. This is our second collection of poems by Arun Kumar, today's guest. Welcome to Future Past. I hope you're enjoying it. And today it's a very special guest, like always. But what makes it special is that I started with the first lines of this poem. I sincerely urge you to read up. We'll talk about it also a little later. But first, let's welcome Arun Kumar. And many of you are already familiar because you also see that today's guest is Arun Kumar, and his brief bio, which in brief itself is very vast. That he's mostly an Indian audience will know him for his being CEO of KPMG India, and many would also know and recognize him as a diplomat in the Obama administration. And perhaps few would know him as a poet with this book, and some of you would also know him for his book, The Global Trade Paradigm. And in fact, the last line of what I read, in some sense, is a thread I thought would be more appropriate as in how many ways can you spell shop? Arun Kumar, welcome to Future Path.
Thank you, Nanju. Great to be here.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for making time to be here with us. And while today Arun's avatar is of running a VC firm, you by now already have gathered that there are multiple layers to Arun, and that's what we try to make an understanding of with this first part of the conversation. Arun, can you share your journey with us and our audience, please?
Well, I grew up I went to a boarding school, the law school up there near Ooty. Then I went to did my undergraduate degree in physics in Trivandrum from the University College Trivandrum, mainly because my parents felt I should at least spend 3 years with them. When I finished that, I joined the Tata Administrative Service, TAS as it is now known, in Bombay, as it was then known. I was with them for 5 years. And then I went to the MIT Sloan School of Management for an MBA, found myself in Silicon Valley right after that. After a few years of various things, including some very interesting entrepreneurial ventures, I ended up at KPMG in the Valley in management consulting. I eventually led management consulting there and served on the board of KPMG in the US. I actually retired from KPMG in 2013, but a few days after that, I was nominated by President Obama to join his administration as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Global Markets and head of the US and Foreign Commercial Service, which was an organization. I was really the chief executive of a bureau with people in 78 countries and all the 50 states of the United States. When the Obama term finished, KPMG came back to me and asked if I would come out to India and be chairman and CEO of KPMG in India, which I did for 5 years. And when that finished, my friends at Celesta Capital asked if I would join them, continue to have an engagement in India. So that's where I am. That's a short version of a long story.
Well, you have got two collections of poems published, but when did your tryst with poetry begin? Perhaps from your school days or much later? Or?
And I was always interested in poetry from a very early age. My father was interested in poetry. I had a wonderful English teacher who was interested in poetry, and I had a great interest in poetry, but I didn't do much with it. Um, Many years later, when in California, I started writing and actually created a small body of work, which I showed to my friend Abraham Verghese, the now famous author of Covenant of Water. And Abraham said, "Well, this is really worth publishing." So then I got a publisher, published it. That was my first book called Plain Truths. And 10 years later, uh, I published my second anthology, which is one that you shared, Mantram Beach. So I would say I'm not a prolific poet, but I like to write. And so far my record is every 10 years I'm coming out with an anthology, which is not high frequency.
Well, but also the style of writing seems to be more like it's some of it reads like a travel log, some of it reads like your that day's experience. So it's not that you are one of those who sit and write every day, right? So what is the trigger? Because obviously your observation is so vast, so varied. So what part of the observation triggers you for that to be a poem, and what does not?
I'm also interested in photography, and I'll compare my approach to poetry with photography.
Ah,
So in
okay.
photography, we all see the same thing, but the photographer is looking for some kind of a unique angle,
Mm,
something special that not only the photographer, but everybody would relate to. So my thinking about poetry is to try to find the unusual in the usual,
right,
and perhaps the usual in the unusual. And that's
right.
what I try to do with my poetry, so that a poem has to appeal to not just a writer. I feel you write for other people to read, at least in my case. Some people write for themselves. I would say, certainly for myself, but even more importantly for the reader. So you need to try to find those things that have more universal appeal than just appeal to yourself.
Well, so is there a photo exhibition coming up somewhere sometime soon then?
And photography is just right in my home. No,
You've not, never shown your photographs to people in your circle at least?
and I've just used it to. No, in my office in Washington D.C., I decorated with my photographs because it was in a way appropriate. They were photographs from around the world, and the job that I had was an international role, so it made sense. But I've not actually gone into into exhibiting my photographs in a public place.
Well, uh, one is that you are a private person in that sense, and at the same time, uh, your business has been very much a public person. At least part of your responsibility as a representing United States government in the commerce space, of course, and then as an author, you obviously have put your thoughts and perspectives for the world to one understand, and perhaps also somewhere also attract a lot of criticism in that sense. But most importantly, putting out yourself open. So, how do you balance this, a private person and a public person with strong opinions, and also a very balanced approach, and also bringing a flavor of your, different things that you have done? Because I think your profession as a management consultant would have given insights, deep insights into multiple businesses, and then also across geographies. So if you have to look at all these things and introduce yourself as who is Arun Kumar, what would be the answer?
I would say that I just enjoy being part of different worlds. So I enjoy being here at Bangalore. being part of the entrepreneurial scene and the investment scene. Similarly, in Silicon Valley, I enjoy being in Washington, D.C., in the policy and government scene. And I enjoy the time that I spend with writers, whether they are fiction writers or writers poetry. So I love these different worlds that I'm drawn to.
How do your writer commune relate to you? Someone who's a businessman, an investor, a professional, a bureaucrat, a, a partly politician, and a author. How do they connect to someone like you? Because sometimes many of the writer community would probably be on the other side of the.
No, actually, I think that writers are very curious people. They're really interested in different kinds of experiences. So just as I am drawn to them, their creativity, uh, and they are interested in a very different perspectives, angles. I don't really see a contradiction there. Uh,
Well, naturally, because you are so naturally driven to you. I mean, I've seen quite a few of your conversations online where you are in the panel or you're speaking as a speaker. You seem to have a very balanced approach to most of your conversations, and even if when you're challenged uh, when even somebody is questioning you and trying to box you, and you seem to dissolve it in a very nice way. Is it something that you acquired over a period of time, or were you always like this since your childhood that you would neutralize situation and manage it uh, in a nicer way?
I haven't really thought about that, but I think uh, I'm not looking,
I mean,
not
it
look.
came naturally to you all along, is it? I mean, it's not that something that you worked on. I mean, because it seems so. Uh, when somebody puts a very tough question also to you, you make it. Uh, you so nicely soft pedal it and bring out the whole response that you don't even. I mean, you dissolve the conflict primarily, if I have to say that, right? So, uh, is that something you worked on, or it's always been natural to you?
I'm sure it's grew. I mean, if what you're saying is right, I'm sure it's something that has developed over time. Um, but I think the main thing is to be listening. So if someone makes a point, if you really listen to the core of what they're saying and then respond to that, that should make for a connection. There are times when you don't want to respond. Somebody's asking a question with a particular motivation. So in the world of diplomacy, there are many times when you don't want to respond. And essentially, at that point, what you do is you don't answer the question that's asked, but you provide the answer you want to give to the question that you would like them to ask. Uh, so that's a different game. But by and large, I feel that if you're listening to the interlocutor, then you can find a way to create communication. And communication is rarely created by just trying to win an argument, because both sides will try to win the argument. I think the real communication is when you can find the middle ground, a place of agreement, and the places where you see we both mutually disagree. That's how I would think about those kinds of interchanges.
Right. Well, in fact, I urge our audience and listeners to look you up. The link is below this podcast, and there is a website, and there are all his conversations where he's also part of the panel that I was referring to in some of the conversations and how he's responding to them. I'm sure you will find it very interesting, and it's also it can be a lesson if you are. In public life, and if you're part of these panels, and if you're it's a great learning how to take it and not lose a smile like Arun does, and the emotion doesn't sound I mean come out where you don't like the question either, but you handle it. I mean, uh, it's not very common to find such a response, right? In fact, today you even a journalist gets flustered. diplomats get flustered, whose job and definition of they're identified as diplomats, they get flustered with questions, and which is I think it could be a master class. Or perhaps you should try uh, doing something around that sometime if you can do that. I mean, if you have some tips on how to go about it, I would be happy to actually host you on that.
When you're talking about getting flustered, it's never a good idea. In fact, someone once said to me that the only time you should be flustered is when you're faking it. You're faking it. But there may be times when you want to really show a lot of emotion. But if you are, the point is you need to be in control. That getting flustered sometimes is a loss of control and a loss of command of the situation. So
Correct.
sometimes okay to be flustered, but but it's got to be when you know what you're doing.
Oh, I think I know. I completely understand what you just mentioned because I have actually seen some of our politicians, I mean, who are formerly bureaucrats, uh, who actually I've seen he is so composed in everywhere, and some places he suddenly gets flustered, and I always thought, is he faking it just to create that effect? But I
That's
think
right.
now I'm able to connect what you're saying. That I think he's just doing a fantastic job. I mean, I perhaps gave away who it is, who was a bureaucrat and now a politician. But it's 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 you're so right. I mean, I think some people know how to use it, but of course, I mean, when I say journalists who get frustrated, I don't think they're getting frustrated to make a point. I think they're just not in control of themselves and they just get off. So but please do consider the masterclass part of it, and I think it'd be nice because most people need it. Uh, in fact, there was a conversation with another common friend. I mean, who also was suggesting that I should have this conversation with you too, and he was talking about leadership development, and so it'd be very interesting, perhaps. Uh, uh, Talk in that sense also that because this is one aspect of leadership that is so important and you don't really find among most. So I would actually want to do more talking about your book, but just before we get on to that part, perhaps as an independent part itself, uh, your current role as a investor, uh, how do you see your focus is India from a point of operating India operation? So how do you see the um uh, India story from your perspective? I mean, of course,
I,
I understand you have a big baggage of being operating out of India, so your learning and understanding would be far different from any other US VC.
I think over the 5 years I was with KPMG in India, I certainly got a very intimate understanding of the country. It's really a reconnection after being away for decades. I uh, came back to the place where I started, and as I say, discovered it for the first time. You rediscover everything. Uh, but India today is a very exciting place. There's a lot of entrepreneurial energy. So there's a sense that you can do anything. It reminds me very much of what Silicon Valley is and what it used to be even more in the past. Um, so there's that sense of a can-do sense. There's a lot of ambition. There's a lot of tremendous amount of competence. So it's really exciting to be in a situation where you're seeing all of that. And most importantly, you're dealing with very young people, which is that's great because uh, nothing phases them.
Well,
And then
one,
we are
sorry.
focused. We're focused on investing in deep tech. So we don't do too much consumer kinds of things. It's really there is some significantly defensible technology, complicated technology has been developed, and with the IITs and the institutes of science and so forth, there are a lot of extremely competent, extremely talented people who are ready to go out and start new enterprises. So it's great and exciting time to be here. The other interesting thing is the connection between the US and uh, and India. Almost every large US corporation has a capability center in India. who are doing identical work to what people are doing elsewhere in the world. So semiconductor chips are being designed in India. All kinds of interesting machinery are being designed in India. Great work on AI is being done here. So there's this environment here of people who are already working to serve global needs, who can then step out and start enterprises to serve global markets. That's what's exciting.
Well, recently, a recent book, Raghuram Rajan was talking about, I mean, even in his interviews, he mentions that India should focus more on services. Uh, as a investor and as an observer of Indian economy and Indian business, what is your take? I mean, when you say deep tech, you're obviously not looking at services as an opportunity to invest in India, right?
Services can well be one, but we are an
Okay,
investor. We are an investor who actually likes manufacturing. There are many
okay.
investors who only want to do software, others only want to do services, and actually fewer who really want to do manufacturing. So we like hardware and we like manufacturing.
And how
So
do you see India in that?
we see some great examples of companies that are doing really well. I think India's capability in advanced manufacturing is really coming up. Um, so I think it's going to be a area of great potential.
And do you also see you also uh, uh, are in the advisory boards and such? Do you also see research and development focus is getting to the level that it is desirable from a VC or investor perspective in India?
But yeah, I think it'll definitely get there. I mean, I'm seeing things here. Very often,
Mhm.
those are done in collaboration with teams in the US. But yeah, they're world class.
Okay, I think that was really encouraging that. Uh, you and what just we also have many entrepreneurs and startups in our audience and listeners. So uh, maybe what kind of startup and what stage of startup do you invest? Probably for them, of course, they will all obviously look up your website and the links will be there. They can look it up, but probably you could.
So broadly speaking, we look at deep tech with three areas. One would be where there is semiconductor, AI, computer science involved with complicated technologies and defensible designs. That's one area. The second is applying technology to sectoral transformation, applying technologies to healthcare or to agriculture or to education. And the third would be where computer science and AI, etc., meet biotech, which we call bioconvergence. So these are the three broad areas that we look at, and all three have different kinds of very exciting opportunities, and we're seeing them right here. And this is consistent with our team in the US, and we're seeing very similar opportunities in those three areas. We're seeing great opportunities in India.
Oh, wonderful! And what stage do you get into from?
So we typically have what we call Series A and Series B investors. We like to get in Series A, supported with the Series B. We are active investors, so typically we either lead or co-lead a deal. We serve on the board of the company, and we work very closely with the founders and the management to help build the company and grow value. Once in a while, we might do something earlier or later, but generally, we are Series A and Series B investors.
Arun, I just want to, if you could put a number as Series A, because in India, many VCs Series A many a times doesn't tally with the Series A reference of a
So
VC in
typically,
US.
yeah, I mean, these are all variable, but you could look at a $3 to $5 million investment in a Series a similar investment in a Series B. Sometimes you might do a smaller investment in a Series A, or even do something before Series A. And sometimes you might do something bigger later. So by and large, I would say 3 to 5 Series A and B is how I would look at it.
And another thing people generally refer to complexity in India is getting a right exit for a VC. What's your take on that?
The interesting thing is that the Indian public markets seem to become even more and more attractive. I mean, almost every month, I hear somebody from the US saying, well, maybe we should actually consider moving to India and going public here. So that's a
From
really
US
interesting,
coming to India to go public?
yeah, where people have got an investment here and there. Often it used we would start here, then you would relocate there. Now I'm seeing examples where people are saying, well, why don't we relocate to India and address all the various tax issues, etc., because they
Hmm.
see liquidity in going public in India. So I think the Indian public markets are at a point where they're welcoming technology companies, and we will see more action here. So that's one. Second would be the typical way of going public on Nasdaq. The third would be, and which is usually the most dominant exit, is M&A, where there's a company that really likes the technology, they want to buy you. Um, so those are three, major ways.
You don't find it as challenging, relatively speaking, from other markets in India from an exit point of view, because many investors do talk about it.
Well, exits are always challenging everywhere. So each company has to build the value.
Are
Then
Indian companies more challenging, or you think it's all similar to anywhere else?
I think it's broadly similar. And every startups are not easy. There's a lot of work, there are a lot of challenges. A lot of things come from left field that you have to deal with. So it's certainly not easy, and that's not easy there. It's not easy here,
All
but
right.
it's worth it because it's very exciting. The sense of accomplishment. If you create value, it can work out financially.
Well, last question. If you wear your management consulting hat in your investment proposition, how would you advise the startup founders? I'm just trying to use this opportunity to get you to give some advice to the startup founders who are looking for funding. Uh, can you give them some advice before they approach to the investor, before they approach you as well?
No, I think looking funding clearly have a really good idea. And even if it's not fully baked, I have a reasonable idea. I have a good sense of what the market's going to be. Talk to a lot of people, both in the market as well as technologists, to fine tune the approach. I think it's really valuable to get a lot of input uh, to really fine tune and crystallize what it is that you want to do. And then, then come talk to venture capitalists. Um, that's what I would suggest. Now, once you get started, I think it's really important to also make sure you have some good governance, because I'm finding a lot of issues when companies are so focused only on development, which they should be. They take their eye off the ball on just basic management, managing your financials, managing your cash flow, uh, making sure you have a proper audit and compliance regime. So these are things that should not be neglected, because they can come to be very expensive if they are neglected.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is one aspect. A lot of people refer to Indian companies are not as focused on the compliance side, and they chalta. Let's see later on. So how it could be seriously expensive, right, for Indian
Could be.
companies.
And in India, the compliance regime in India is it's quite a demanding compliance regime. So I think it's important that that's not forgotten.
Right. And are you participating any recommendations in making it little more easy, because that is one very active conversation happening in India, particularly on this side, that it has to be more easy to run a business and set up a business, which is it's been a very long standing conversation but not seen much action.
And that's right. It's a journey, and I've been involved in that from multiple points of view, back from when I was in the US government to when I was KPMG, working with multiple states, center on ease of doing business. But I think there's a lot more to be done, but there's been a lot of progress. It definitely has been a
So
lot of progress.
have you seen it as responsive when you came from as a diplomat to when you came from as a business, business head of a multinational in India? How was the response from the government agencies on these conversations?
Set on the high level, the governments are all very committed to doing the right thing. And in fact, if you look back over the last 10 years, you've seen various important measures like the GST, which made India for the first time into one common market. Until then, it was really difficult and the costs were exorbitant in terms of logistics and so forth. So we've seen big change. That's one. Two is the whole uh, insolvency and bankruptcy code really
Right.
made it easier to exit. And it's important in businesses to be able to exist when things don't work out. So there have been some really good, I would call those out as really good steps that the government has taken. They've also taken, then the real estate area, you've got the real estate regulation that has really helped that market. So a number of good steps have been taken. Now the issue is how do these flow down all the way? So when you go into to start a company, how many forms you have to fill, what do you have to do? So those are things are being worked on, but I think they will all get sorted out over time. But it's not as easy as one would expect. There are issues, there are challenges. But what I find is that there are many agencies that really want to help this happen.
Where did you find the outcome to be most effective when you reached out uh, as a government official or as top executive from a large corporation? Where did you see the better response coming out? In which avatar of yours or a business card of yours got you better response?
Well, both of them in different ways, but the objectives are different. In the case of when I was in the US Department of Commerce, we're trying to make businesses work between the two countries well together. But when I was at KPMG, it was often working with states on their ease of doing business processes, or with the center in terms of helping to create competitiveness on ease of doing business. I think at the high level, you get great response, as I said. Frankly, it doesn't
Both.
matter. Yeah. The issue is because of people who are leading the government departments, they're all very bright and very insightful people. So they get what needs to be done. How that flows down is often more of a challenge. But the good news is that many states have taken this seriously, and the states are competing with each other. So there's a competitive urge for them to do as well as they can or do better than the others. So I think all of that's going to really create a significant amount of change. Finally, in the area of entrepreneurship, I think you see a lot of successful examples, you see examples of success. So more people are enticed to follow those examples. So I think all these pieces are coming together.
Right. Well, I was tempted to ask this. Lastly, uh, do you see, though Indian American population is a very small but significantly influential, so do you see a lot of people coming still more into active government roles like you did, and this is going to get more and more?
In the US, definitely. I mean, at the moment, there are probably 150 to 200 people working in fairly senior roles, which is a large increase.
It's huge.
I was there, yeah, huge. So just in the last, what is
So
it,
people
last 10
like
years,
you have made it more easy for this acceptance
I don't know whether
because you were there nearly 15 years ago, right?
10 years, I mean, I was there 2014, 10 years ago. Um, I think, I don't think it's got to do necessarily with people like me. It's like more Indian Americans are raising their hands to serve. I think that's what's happening. So when they raise their hands to serve, they often have great capabilities to bring into play, and therefore they are welcomed. I think that's what's going on. More people are
And
aware, more people are getting involved, and I think it's a great thing. I think public services are very rewarding. Uh, it's a very rewarding in terms of the fulfillment you get serving larger causes than oneself.
curious, would you have ever considered a role like that if you were to be in India and Indian citizen?
Definitely, yeah, I would.
You would?
Absolutely. Uh,
So
I
is
think
there a
I think public service in India is may have even more. Uh, it's a country at a stage of its development where it can use all the talents it can get in public service. So yes, absolutely.
oh, wonderful? So maybe our audience and listeners, I think you should seriously because this is something people try to keep it away. I mean, it's become a cuss word or a bad word for people to
And
consider. So,
I don't think it's fair because what you find is public servants are usually very hardworking people. They really are trying to do a lot for the very large responsibilities they generally have. Uh, so you might find the occasional one doesn't work that hard, but my experience has been both in the people I dealt with in many governments around the world, and certainly in the US government, that those in public service were driven to the calling that public services. It's kind of higher calling of public service.
wonderful. I mean, you obviously paint a very nice picture, and hope it motivates a lot of people to come into it. Well, Arun, thank you so much for
You know,
this conversation. I want to really jump into the other part, but I want to conclude this. So, thank you once again for all all your thoughts. And of course, I guess we could have gone more and more, but because of short of time, I'm having to conclude this part.
great to be with you, Najo. Thank you for the opportunity. And talk again soon.